Welcome to the Alcohol Free Life podcast, brought to you by thesoberclub.com. I'm Janey Grace. This is for you if you've quit the booze or you'd like to, or maybe you're just sober curious. I'll bring you tips and motivation without any judgment, and there'll be inspiration from experts, quit-lit authors, and sober heroes. Hi, and welcome to the Alcohol Free Life podcast. It's been such a busy week, ridiculously busy. At least we've had some sunshine. And I just want to share with you a few events that we have coming up, which I don't want to forget to tell you about. So we have, there's quite a bit happening. So we have another podcast recording, which is going to be happening in October. That's going to be October the 11th, I think that's looking like. So drop me a message if that's something you're interested in, because tickets sold really quickly last time. We'll reveal our guests in due course. That will be in the evening in London, Wednesday, the 11th of October. Before that, I'm going backwards in my timings. We are probably going to be doing Sober by the Sea on Sunday, September the 24th. So again, if that's of interest, we create a vision board. We had an amazing one last weekend. I got such a lovely testimonial, actually. I should have read it to you. Saying that I was a little bit like a sobriety fairy godmother. Oh, I think I'll kind of take that. That's all right. Spreading a bit of magic, I hope. So we had a really great day. It's wonderful to actually focus on what it is you want for the future. So the next one will be Sunday, September the 24th. So drop me a message if that's of interest. As I say, Wednesday the 11th is the live podcast recording, meetup, just a really great excuse to meet other people on this same path. That will be in London, almost certainly at the Club Soda alcohol-free bar again. Fantastic venue for us. So grateful to Laura for hosting it last time. It was a really lovely event. I'm sure you've seen some of the pics on social media. William Porter was a fantastic guest. Claire Pooley was amazing. And by the way, that was the 250th episode, which is next week. The actual date is next week. So I thought I'd save it so you'll get to hear that recording in next week's podcast. And then if we move forward to October the 15th, Sunday, October the 15th, it's Family Constellations. That will be in Hertfordshire. I do that with a leading trauma expert. I really hope you'll try it if you haven't been before. If you've been before, come again. It's amazing. Sometimes it's been described as like a spa day for the soul. It's fantastic for just changing your perspective, whatever you've got going on in your life. So do think about coming to Family Constellations. That's Sunday, October the 15th. You'll find that under events in the Sober Club. And then I'm still not really done, actually, because at the end of October, it's not my event, but the Sober Club are endorsing an event with Andy Blackman, who is heading it up, one of the coaches that I've trained recently, who's going to be a podcast guest as well. With a bunch of other guys. They do this thing called Sober Guys Talking, but the event is open to all. I'm going to be speaking there, and it's in Manchester. So, we're finally going up north. So that's going to be Sunday, the 29th of October. I think the kickoff is midday in the centre of Manchester. So pop that one in your diary as well. I'm going to be chatting to Andy. He'll share more about that event in a couple of weeks' time. So there's a bunch of things there to pop in your diary. There's no need to feel lonely on this journey. And, if anyone does that thing of, I can't really get there, it's a bit too far, then, I share with you that our lovely Sober Club members, Cindy and Ivan came all the way from Australia and the US respectively for our meetup. I'm sure they were going to be in the UK for other reasons, but they did come all the way for our meetup and for Sober by the Sea. So so do pop those in the diary if it is possible for you. All those dates will be in the show notes on this podcast, and if you go to thesoberclub.com, you'll find all of that information there under events. So make sure you check that, and you can always drop me a message at Janey Lee Grace. So on today's podcast, some of you may have noticed that I posted a message on Instagram or Facebook, probably both, sharing that a fabulous number had popped up for me on the I Am Sober app. 2,000 days. I mean, I don't always check my days. I don't know if it's a thing for you. After a while, you kind of forget. But I just happened to check in, and it was 2,000 days. I thought, wow, that is a thing. It really is a thing. So I thought that if it's okay with you, I would share with you some insights on those 2,000 days. I've written an article as well called Sobriety Unveiled, 2,000 Days, Insights on a Journey to Wellbeing. So I thought I'd share some of these insights with you. It'd be interesting to know what resonates with you. If you're at the very early stages of ditching the booze, then I really hope some of these things that I share will really support you in those early days, because one part of this is just knowing that you're not alone with whatever you're going through. And if you've been sober for a while, I'd really love to know which ones of these insights, as it were, that I flag up here feel as though they're relevant to you. And if you've got many others that you'd add in, I'm guessing you may well have. Anyways, I'm going to share some of these with you. I might get bored of the sound of my own voice, so I might not do them all, but I'll kick off. So what I did write in the post was that, I did a little bit of a big up for myself, to be honest, because, I am proud of my achievements since ditching the booze, because 5 years and almost 8 months. And I've done, 250 episodes of this podcast. So thank you for listening. I've just had the most incredible guests. I'm really, really grateful for that. I've given 2 TEDx talks, Sobriety Rocks Who Knew, and Could Curiosity Be Your Superpower? Of course, I run the Sober Club, the community for the sober curious and the already sober who focus on well-being. I host events and retreats. Love doing that. Didn't even mention the retreat, did I? Which next Champneys retreat is November the 4th now, November the 4th and 5th. I've done lots of training over the last 5 years. I now work as a sobriety wellbeing coach. I train others to become Sober 360 coaches. So I work one-to-one and also train other coaches. I've also written my book, of course, Happy, Healthy, Sober. And it's a lot, isn't it? And I am really proud of that stuff, but none of it happened just because I was kind of pushing for a new career. I mean, far from it. I almost didn't even share any of this. I don't know, any of my journey. I was really thinking, should I just keep quiet about all of this? But then when I got to, I think it was about eight months before I did my coming out video on YouTube. And boy, was I nervous about that. But of course, I'm very glad I did. It's become really my whole life's work, I think, sharing the joy of sobriety really has. But it wasn't all plain sailing at the beginning. And actually, it's been very interesting for me to reflect on this journey. So I wanted to share some of the insights, some of the lessons that have come my way since I started all of this. And it has really been quite the roller coaster, full of the twists, the turns, all the views, all the rides, really. So I've got 21 insights that have been important for me along this path. As I say, I may not do them all. You might get fed up with my voice. But let's start with insight 1. And I've titled this, The Early Days Can Be Really Tough. Oh yeah, and probably not much of a surprise to you there. If you are not clinically dependent on alcohol, physically, the discomfort can ease relatively quickly. I remember feeling headachy for a few days, terrible sleep, which was a bit of a shocker. I felt very kind of wobbly. It's hard to describe it. I had sort of leg cramps, weird stuff, a few weird pains, which I thought, what the hell is going on? But physically, the discomfort eases relatively quickly, once the alcohol kind of leaves your system. But the mental anguish is unreal. And that constant chatter in your brain, it's that voice that constantly tells you, you can't do this. This is much too hard. You'll never manage to do this. You won't manage it even for a few days. That inner critic voice And really, it makes sense because if you think about it, we've been furrowing the same path, this neural pathway for years and years, in my case, an awful lot of years. And it's a very well-worn path. So I had to learn that I needed to try to quieten that voice, to try and make it smaller, to try and talk back to that inner critic and just bring in curiosity. I am now a very big fan of bringing in curiosity. I just had to start to say to myself, I am curious as to how it might feel when I am free from this. You know, we can't instantly say to ourselves, no, I'm feeling great. I feel wonderful, because the unconscious mind says, no, you don't. But we can just become curious. So I do remember feeling fragile, very disconnected. I was a bit of an emotional wreck, cried at everything. I mean, I still do, in fairness, but now it's more likely to be tears of joy or tears of gratitude for finally getting to be by the sea. But I was definitely fragile. So if that's something going on for you, know that that is very common. And yes, the early days are tough. Insight 2 is that one of the reasons everything is tough is because the brain chemistry is out of whack, and doing the basics, doing the lifestyle basics is what's needed to support it. Now, back then when I quit, I literally forgot everything that I knew. I'd been queen, if you like, of holistic living for years. I mean, apart from stepping around the elephant in the room, there's alcohol. I'd been eating well. I'd been taking supplements. But somehow when I stopped drinking, everything went to pot. I literally forgot everything I knew. And by about week 3, probably way too late, I finally rang a nutritionist, healer friend of mine. And you know, she basically said, get a grip. And I eventually went back to those basics. I started eating properly. I got some great supplements to support everything. And since then, I've done a huge amount of training and research on this. And now I do see it as the absolute bedrock. And now with my one-to-one clients, we absolutely go over the diet, the basics, and really for everyone. I can tell you now, whatever's going on for you, if you're early stages, even if you're a few months in and you're not feeling great, eat properly. Well, I know that sounds like, you know, stating the bleeding obvious, but eat properly. That means no fasting, not for those first few weeks, no faddy diets. You need really good, proper food, as least processed as possible, bit of protein with every meal, really good fats, absolutely no artificial sweeteners. I hope that's kind of obvious. And I do believe that everybody needs good supplements in the beginning. You know, we just don't get enough of the good stuff from the foods that we eat, however good it is. So check it out on the show notes to this episode. I will put some of the basics that I recommend for the right supplements, because you've got to get the right ones. And trust me, I've really researched this over the years. This is not about me selling anything. I don't sell anything. There is a link that I'll give you. And if you order those supplements that I recommend using my link, then a little bit gets put into our Sober Club Give Back Fund. So I'm very grateful for that, if you're willing to do that. But I'll give you the recommendations. And there's also an article, a blog post on the Sober Club as well. But I can't stress enough, don't skip this piece. Don't launch into ditching the booze and think, oh, great, I'll lose a few pounds, so I won't eat either. It honestly won't work. You really do have to start that good nutrition and the supplements really day one, as soon as possible. Insight number 3 was a bit of a surprise for me. Shame can rear its ugly head. So in addition to feeling very raw and emotional, because, you know, you have to feel all the feels when you first stop drinking. You know, I've heard people say, oh, for God's sake, life seemed easier when I could just numb it all out. I mean, of course that's not true, but it is how we sometimes perceive it in the early weeks. But in addition to feeling very emotional, shame really popped up for me. I felt this real deep embarrassment and shame about how I'd been for years. Now, previously, I'd have just defended my own habits. You know, I was really in denial. But when I quit, I knew that I had to own it. And acknowledging my own addiction was really tough, really challenging for me, partly because it felt like a massive responsibility. And also because I wanted to shield others, shield those close to me from the pain that I felt. I really did not want to share it, really did not want to talk about it. But of course, the antidote to shame is vulnerability and honesty, even when the conversations are tough. I also found all the terms awkward. I didn't know how I would even refer to myself. I never referred to myself as an alcoholic. I never was an alcoholic. I would never use that label. I used to use the phrase alcohol free, and even the words sober and sobriety felt really awkward for me back then. I do think it's become more acceptable now. And I do think people like Catherine Gray have helped, with her fabulous books. As Catherine said, the phrase stone cold sober needs a big old rebrand. And she's got that wonderful book, Sunshine, Warm, Sober. But just be prepared for that shame that might come flying in. And that leads me to insight 4, which is that at some point, forgiveness will need to come in too. Once we start to look back at what's happened in the past, it can literally blindside us. The weight of the guilt and the shame, it just feels too much. I've heard clients say, I was doing all right, and then suddenly I felt literally blindsided by a memory, something that came up for me, something that I'd done, the guilt that I felt. What has to be stressed here is that the early months are not the time to deal with this. Maybe there are amends to be made. There were for me, but they can't be done at the beginning of the journey. But what you can begin to do from as early as possible really is begin to forgive yourself. I know that sounds just real flippant and easy, but none of us can change what's happened. We can't change what we did, but we can change what we're doing now. We can look forward. We can, think about leaving that baggage behind, and being able to forgive ourselves is key. I also think we have to forgive ourselves for not just for what we may or may not have done when we were under the influence, but also forgive ourselves for becoming addicted in the first place, because it's the alcohol that's addictive. It's not our lack of willpower or addictive personality that's to blame. Now, of course, our culture would have us think it is. Our culture would have us all drink a lot, and go to great pains to ensure that we continue to drink. I mean, on a side note, drives me absolutely bonkers, as you will have heard me say before, that if you rock up to a GP, they'll recommend having an alcohol-free day. How about life's better, have none? But, back on this forgiveness piece, I've shared with, I'm sure I've mentioned on the podcast, it's something I talk about in the Sober Club, the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. And if you score really a pretty low number on there, it means you have a huge percentage likelihood of having an addiction in later life. So, when we look at that, we can sometimes go, oh, right. So it's not my fault. It's my childhood. It's what happened in my childhood. Duh, blame the parents. But that isn't the answer either. It's that lovely phrase, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Once we can see it, we can deal with it. Once we can see it, we can begin to take back control. None of us are perfect, right? My book and website are called Imperfectly Natural. I'm grateful that I landed on that one. But we can embrace our imperfections. I did a whole podcast on the whole concept of being flawsome, if you might remember that. Awesome, but still flawed. That sounds about right. Insight number 5 is focus only on what you are gaining. You will have heard me say a lot, never use the phrase giving up. There's nothing to give up. Initially, just before I stopped, and maybe for the first couple of weeks, I hadn't quite grasped this. I was thinking, oh, how am I going to manage? How am I going to just be without alcohol? How will I get through stuff? Will life always be miserable? I was thinking about what I was, in inverted commas, giving up. As soon as I caught sight of that possible better life without the booze, that's when it started to change. I was able to find enough of a flame within me to keep me going, that little flame that could start to extinguish the doubts and the fears. And very slowly, it started to feel possible. There was just that bit of that chink of light. It felt like a bleak existence before when I was focusing on the lack. But actually, when you think about it, to focus on what you're missing out on when what you're missing out on is toxic liquid. I mean, it's just insanity, isn't it? Alcohol is toxic. There is nothing to give up. For me, to start with, feeling well, feeling happy, just felt like it was forever away. Felt like a very distant destination. But you do get closer, you know, to put it poetically. The beauty of reaching that peak lies not just in the view, but in realizing how truly deserving you are. It really took me a long time to get to that point, but I did just start to feel a little glimmer of excitement that I could overcome this, that I could be free from this trap. And really, that is all about focusing only on what you're gaining. So please never use the phrase giving up. Don't allow yourself to say it. Just reframe it, change it to, I'm quitting alcohol, I'm ditching the booze, I'm stopping drinking, whatever works for you, but don't use the phrase giving up. And 5.8 years on, by the way, 2,000 days on, I am free. I'm not recovering. I am recovered. That will probably spark some arguments if you are from a very traditionally 12-step background, but that's my truth. Insight 6 is the invisible face of addiction. When I think back, I realize that I became very good at playing a role when I was drinking. I really seemed completely fine. We know not all battles are visible on the surface, are they? If you're addicted, it doesn't always mean you're going to look disheveled, you're going to be having run-ins with the law. I was having internal struggles, usually at 3 a.m. It was a storm beneath the calm waters, and really no one else knew that I had an issue. I presented okay. I rocked up to work. I did all the right things. I didn't drive drunk. I never really had a rock bottom, and nobody else knew anything else was happening. But I had to acknowledge it. I had to validate my own experience. And that's why I do think that sharing what's going on for you with someone else is really important. In the early days, for me, I told Claire Pooley, most of you know that it was Claire's book, The Sober Diaries, that kicked everything off for me. And she was really the only person I told in the early weeks. I didn't share it with my family. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but I didn't. God knows they must have wondered when they saw all the quit lit book orders flying through the door. But looking back, I'm quite glad I didn't, because although my husband was very well-meaning, it wasn't his experience. He had an off switch when it came to alcohol. So if I had shared it with him, just exactly how raw I was feeling, how emotional I was feeling, how disconnected, he probably would have said, oh, you've done great. You've done 3 weeks now. That's really good. Obviously, you're fine. You can just have one. So it is important to recognize that hiding isn't good. Do share how you're feeling, but share it with someone who gets it. Share it with someone, preferably outside of your immediate family, who really has been there, done it, got the t-shirt. This is why I started the Sober Club. This is why I'm not embarrassed to share with you that I think it's brilliant for everyone, whether you're starting out or you've been sober for years, because actually sharing what's going on to others who get it is really a game changer. We become cheerleaders for each other. So if you haven't already, do check out the Sober Club. If that's not for you, but you just want to tell somebody, then message me. I'll answer if I can. You can find me on social media. I'm very easy to find. Insight 6 is empowerment through knowledge. Many of you have heard me say this before. I do think immersing yourself in knowledge and inspiration really helps in those early weeks and months. I listened to podcasts. I absolutely loved podcasts. That's why I started my own. I delved deep into the science and the logic of it all. I felt that I really needed to learn about alcohol because for so many years I thought I was the problem, but I really hadn't realized that alcohol is a toxic, addictive substance. It has zero benefits. And the more I learned, the more I realized that I really did need to know about alcohol. I really did need to know just how bad it really was. And so knowledge can be a catalyst for transformation. But I do think as well that it's critical to have the motivation too. So in addition to that science, in addition to that logic, I read loads of memoirs, loads of motivational books about how wonderful sobriety is. And really, for me, that's what made the biggest difference, that catching sight of that happier life so that I felt that sense of motivation. Insight 7 is there are many shades of grey and none of them sexy. So we know there are many paths beyond the traditional AA route. I had no idea. If you'd asked me 6 years ago what someone could do if they felt they were drinking too much, I wouldn't have had any clue for you. I probably would have said, well, I guess if it's really bad, they can go to AA or perhaps smart recovery. You know, society has led us to believe that there are the two types of drinkers. There's those at rock bottom who perhaps can look to rehab or a 12-step program. And then there's everyone else, and they're just very happy, social drinkers. If they get hungover every now and then, well, just have an alcohol-free day. Yeah. It's absolute BS. We know it's a spectrum. There are many shades of grey, as I say in my TEDx talk, at least 50 shades of grey, and none of them sexy. And Jolene Park coined the phrase grey area drinker. It's a very powerful phrase. It really helped me when I was able to realize that, yeah, it's a spectrum. We don't have to wait till we hit rock bottom to get off, that booze elevator. Recognizing that there were other people like me who also hadn't hit rock bottom, yet they'd chosen to quit. It really helped. It really kind of opened everything up and made it feel possible. Lesson 8, or insight number 8, is trusting our intuition and recognizing that our thoughts create our reality. So I had to become better at trusting my intuition. For years, I realize now that I thought I was good at trusting my intuition, but actually I'd been listening to that voice in my head that I now realize was just the wine witch, the addictive voice that would say, go on, have another one, it's fine. I'd given nowhere near enough attention to that small, quiet voice of conscience, that voice that spoke to me at 3 a.m., that nudge. And it really did feel like a physical nudge that was saying to me, what are you doing? This is not authentic with who you are. You've had another whole bottle of wine and it's a bloody Tuesday. What are you doing? Please just start to take care of yourself. When we stop drinking, we can get more in tune with our intuition. We can actually listen. I now really believe that, there's that lovely book title, isn't there? The body holds the score. We do know, our bodies do know. And if we start to trust, it's amazing, the insights that we can get. Our intuition really can guide us towards transformation. Sometimes the thoughts that come in act as arrows that literally point us to a new direction. So I had to start properly noticing my thoughts and becoming aware of them, even the ones that are not so nice. Over the last few years, I've done lots of work around this. I've trained in NLP. I've done an awful lot around positive psychology. And I now really get that our thoughts create our reality and shape our future. I really believe we all need to become thought detectives. I did that lovely podcast with Cheryl Rickman where she talks about this. We need to challenge all the thoughts that come in and ask them, well, particularly the negative ones, is that true? I now really try and choose my thoughts wisely. Of course, I sometimes get into negativity. I'm human. We all do, don't we? But I've borrowed the mantra from Sue Stone. She was one of my guests on the podcast a while back, author of A Wonderful World for All. And Sue says, regularly repeat these words. I love life and life loves me. It's very simple, isn't it? Sounds a bit twee, but what have you got to lose? I love it. Insight 10 is we will need patience in change. This one came as a surprise to me because I had genuinely expected when I first stopped drinking that certainly if I made it to 3 weeks, I'd have dropped a couple of stone, I'd be sleeping well, I'd look amazing, I'd feel fantastic, I'd have no anxiety, I'd be making better choices. I mean, crazy, really. Things don't change especially quickly. That's the truth of it. After years and years of drinking, it really isn't that simple. Change will take some time. Everything has to recalibrate, and awareness will build, and the transformation will come in. But even accepting yourself as a non-drinker is a gradual process. There's both the physical and the emotional side here. So physically, things need to shift. Everything has to recalibrate. And emotionally, we really do need patience. We really do need those baby steps. But we do get stronger. And one thing that I found really helpful was to document the little things that are changing, because it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget little stuff. But it's great to be able to go back and reread journals. So I now encourage clients that I'm working with to write down, at the end of every day, write down at least 5 blessings. So I don't call this a gratitude list, because gratitude lists, people tend to think that means that we write down, I am grateful for my home and my family. I mean, we know that, right? These are not necessarily the obvious big things. These are the little things, the little signs that things are getting better, or that something is different because of choosing not to drink. So over time, these little moments start to build. I call them bright spots. So, I ask clients to write what have been the bright spots. It might be something really tiny. It might be that you knew that you were a bit more kind to the person at the photocopier who you normally get grumpy with. It might be that you had a bit more patience, or that you just really enjoyed having a nice meal and an alcohol-free drink, or you found yourself just enjoying the birds singing when you went for a walk. Who knows? It's little things. The other expression I've heard recently is glimmers. It's that little glimmer of something. I used to be horribly impatient. I'm still not the most patient person in truth, but I really used to be so impatient, that horrible grouchy person. If I was in a nice tea shop meeting a friend for tea or coffee, and they didn't also serve wine, I'd be that horrible kind of grumpy person who really got grumpy about that. Whereas now, what's not to like? A vintage teacup? Perfect. Insight 11 is social pressure does not have to be a problem. So I didn't tell anyone for the first few months. I'm not recommending that, as I've said many times, but it's just the way it went for me. So I went about my life as before. Some people hole up, they get themselves feeling strong, and then they head off out and become social. But I did it differently because I hadn't told anyone. I would have had no reason not to do everything I would have done before. So I carried on as normal, and I didn't even particularly prep ahead, which wasn't a great idea. But the truth was, now I think back to all of the events, all the social stuff I did, people really hardly noticed when I chose not to drink. And I really am clear about the reason for that. It's because I didn't make a big deal of it. I just calmly asked for whatever drink I wanted, often said, I'll have a sparkling water, but I'll have it in a wine glass, please. I do remember one occasion I was out with people from the BBC, Someone just handed me a glass of wine because they knew that's what I normally drink, and I didn't say anything, didn't mention it at all. I just put it down on a table when no one was particularly watching me, and went and got myself some water. Nobody noticed. The pressure that I had been feeling about going out was self-imposed. So I had to learn to just trust and allow that anxiety to ease, and just enjoy social events without the booze. It's not always easy at the beginning. You don't really know who exactly you are. And also, I don't deny some people do come up against sober shamers. I do absolutely get that. But I do also think that if you are solid in your decision, if you're fully authentic, you can't argue with that. People don't tend to argue with it. They barely notice if you don't make a big deal of it. So there are lots of tips that I recommend in Happy, Healthy, Sober and in the Sober Club for how you would prep for those early days of socializing. But I think it's important to stress this insight, which is that, being fearful of socializing, it doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't have to be a big deal. Insight 12 is the need to step into a new identity. Now, this one really does take time, embracing your new sober identity. And it really strengthens the connections that you have, the ones that really matter. I really was not sure who I was when I first stopped drinking. I didn't know which part of me I was meant to put on show, if that makes sense. The party girl kind of wasn't there. I remember going out to lunch with some girlfriends, and it was almost as though I was watching myself, observing myself from above. And who is this person who would normally be the one, yelling for the waiter to come over so we could get another bottle of something that I wanted, whether they did or not? I'd be the one sort of driving the conversations. And in that instance, I was really quite quiet. It was really odd. It really was odd. I can't deny that. I was definitely less loud. I was also less grumpy. But I didn't feel very grounded in the beginning. And I now know that can take a while. I now know that being connected is what makes a difference. You do need to get in touch with the emotions that you're feeling. You do need to put the self-care in place. But being connected with other people going through similar things really does help. So the self-care is massive within this. When you start to take care of yourself and you start to ask, well, what is it that I really need in this moment? Perhaps I'm not as extroverted as I thought I was. I've met lots of sober club members who have realized in sobriety that actually they're quite sort of self-sufficient, and they actually really love their own company, and they're not extroverted at all. You do get to find out who you are. You start to discover the real you. I've actually never met anyone who liked themselves more when they were drinking. Never. What nearly always underpins addiction is a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self-love. And that does not come instantly. It really doesn't. It built very, very slowly for me. But being connected, taking more care of yourself, and having some cheerleaders, having some people who've got your back really help with this one. Insight 13. This is all about cravings being emotional signals. So cravings can pop up. They're odd ones, cravings, because cravings are rarely thirst. They're rarely a craving for alcohol. The cravings that can come in triggered, if you like, by, I don't know, someone drinking in the sunshine, by a song that comes on the radio, by feeling grumpy, whatever it might be. It's really a craving for the associations that we believe the alcohol will bring us. It's what we feel we're going to get from it. That's why we crave what we think. We think we're craving alcohol. because we want to go back to those memories that we had of the confidence, the laughter, the glamour that alcohol brought. Of course, it's absolute BS. Alcohol doesn't give us any of those things. You know, the emperor's not wearing any clothes. Now I look back and I realize that the cravings, when they hit me, were a yearning for emotional change. They were about wanting to feel different. They were about wanting to know how to handle emotions. And then there's this idea of fading effect bias, the way we look back at the past with these rose-colored specks. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely? Oh, you know, now I'm a few weeks in, a few months in. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely now to sit by the river with a glass? No, actually, you know what would not be lovely? Going back to drinking would not, in fact, solve anything at all. Insight 15. I lost track of my insights. I can't remember. I might have missed one out. But anyways, ditching the booze is the best parenting hack ever. We do need to feel all our emotions when we stop drinking. That can be a massive challenge. And when you are feeling all your emotions, when you have to face all your own sensitivities, all your own bad behavior, really, that's probably the best way I can sum it up. There's nothing like being a parent to really reflect that back to you, to shine a light on your own, your own challenges and your interactions with your kids. And I found that I did find it a challenge, but I found that I was much better able to understand my kids' sensitivities, handle their emotional outbursts better, only because I was more able to understand my own. Over time, didn't come instantly, but over time I found that I had a lot more empathy, a lot more patience, a lot more time. I was able to be more present for the kids. Of course, become a much better role model for my teenagers. Very grateful for that. An amazing highlight of ditching the booze for me was that I knew that I was free from the trap. And I remember getting a call at midnight from my son to see if I could pick him up. And, I was like a kid. I was like, oh, so excited that I could jump in the car. I mean, it's a little bit of a bittersweet victory, isn't it, becoming a taxi driver? But really, seriously, how cool to have that freedom, to have that incredible freedom of being able to be there if you choose to be. Literally, my only regret is not doing this when the kids were younger. If you are in the early stages of ditching the booze and you're a parent, well, give yourself the biggest pat on the back. It's just fantastic. If your kids are grown up, or if you're now a grandparent, well, it's never too late, is it? It's never too late to be the best role model you can be. The next insight is having a new realization of what joy and gratitude is. So we've all been sold this big lie about alcohol making us cheerful, about, let's drown our sorrows and get happy again. Just the phrase cheers. It's absolutely nonsense. Alcohol numbs both negative and positive feelings, and eventually everything flattens out and it's hard to properly feel really anything much. Sobriety lets you rediscover proper happiness, authentic happiness. I'm sure you've heard me say on this podcast that I can't remember how many weeks into sobriety I was, but I remember waking up and, those kind of first few moments where you're just checking in. I mean, that's enough, isn't it? Just that when you wake up and that incredible feeling of, oh my God, how amazing. I'm not drunk. I'm not hungover. Oh my God, how incredible is that? The ceiling is not in fact spinning. Amazing. And I remember that in addition to that lovely thought, I had this other feeling that I couldn't really place, and because I didn't recognize it. And then I came to realize that it was contentment. And that's not the same as everything being perfect in your life. It's just that feeling of, being centered. I've also mentioned lots of times that the word joy popped up for me. And I'd not considered that word since being in church. Even then, I don't know if it ever felt real for me. But, I really believe that alcohol steals joy. And when you get sober, you can start to find that sense of authenticity and happiness. And that's not the same as always being mega high. It's not the same as everything always being perfect. You may not be bouncing off the walls and, dressed as a clown the whole time. It's more about being able to flow through the ups and downs of life, if you like, just have that feeling of being centered. I've also learned that gratitude is everything. I've already mentioned making notes of the bright spots, but gratitude is really key. When I had those really crap days in the early weeks and months, I forced myself to notice, to write down what it was that I really appreciated, and it really made a difference. Insight 17, unless I've lost track, which is perfectly possible, is prioritizing self-care. And I came to learn really the hard way that self-care is not selfish. It's absolutely essential. I really used to think that self-care was drinking a, large glass of Sauvignon followed by another few. And I now realize, in fact, that was self-harming. So I did force myself. I don't know how I realized the importance of this, but I'm very grateful that I did put some self-care in place in those early weeks. It's probably because I didn't know what else to do with myself, to be honest. I started walking in nature. I started journaling, stream of consciousness stuff, a few pages every day, letting the thoughts out. I started making some little energy balls, some nice snacks for myself. Trying to get to the sea, I would diarize that whenever I could. I got better over time at prioritizing my needs. It's all about being able to acknowledge our worthiness and put that self-care in place. And don't skip this step, because whatever stage you're at, I've heard Cheryl Richardson, the life coach, she talks about extreme self-care. And that's it, isn't it? That's what we need. We need, certainly in these early weeks, we have to put ourselves first. By the way, if you are very much a people pleaser, you might find this piece very hard. If you're the kind of person that spends all your time focusing on everyone else's needs and not your own. But this is the time when you really don't have a choice. You really have to put yourself first if you're going to get free from this trap. Insight 18 is about going within. So in addition to doing the self-care stuff, I started to realize the importance of going within. You'll have all heard me say 1,000 times that I had interviewed pretty much every meditation self-help guru going. I was a Hay House author, a presenter on Hay House Radio. There wasn't much about meditation and spirituality that I didn't know on paper, but it wasn't real to me. I'd never been able to meditate. I could not sit still. I mean, really not even for a couple of minutes. I'd get the shopping list come flying in, or I'd get up and put the washing on. I just couldn't do it. And within a very short time, I realized that this is because alcohol was lowering my vibration. It really was. And sitting in silence, sitting with myself, where potentially the truth might come in, was just way too uncomfortable. I just didn't want to do that. I naturally gravitated towards just busyness to just cover up that authentic voice. It just wasn't possible for me to hear it at that point. So I realized early on that there needed to be some kind of practice. I couldn't launch straight into 20 minutes of meditation, but I did learn not to switch my phone on in a morning. I mean, I always recommend don't even sleep with your phone by your bed, but certainly don't switch it on. Don't put the radio on or open a newspaper or even engage in conversation if you can manage it, until you've gone within. You've literally focused on what's going on in your own head, preferably for 20 minutes. If you can only do 10, that's better than nothing. And in those 10 minutes or 20 minutes, that's when you need to either meditate or listen to a hypnosis audio or do some journaling or put your feet on the earth or walk in nature. It doesn't matter what it is, but go within before you encounter the noise of the outside world. It's a real game changer, made a massive difference. Now everything has changed for me. I do trust myself to be still, and that's, it's really a huge shift for me. Insight 19 is finding creativity and purpose and having more time. I had absolutely no concept of just how much time I'd wasted on not drinking, or rather on drinking, until I was no longer doing it. It took up, oh my God, so much brain space, planning how I'd get the drink. Shall I arrive at the cinema an hour earlier so we could hit the bar? Planning who I'd be drinking with, the actual drinking, then the recovering from the drinking. And when you start to feel better, when you remove alcohol from the equation, you have more time. And that's tricky for some people. They don't really know what to do with that time. So going back to some creative stuff can be really helpful, doing stuff that you really enjoy. Some of my clients have gone back to old hobbies that they loved as a child. Some have just become curious as to how best they can fill their time. Some people have found a whole new sense of purpose and direction. For me, since ditching the booze, I've realized that, it's my absolute passion and purpose to communicate to as many people as possible just how freaking fantastic life without the booze is. Insight 20 is feeling okay about aging. Or another title could be Ditching the Booze is the best anti-aging hack ever. Before ditching the booze, obviously as someone who worked in the media, I did not like the whole idea of getting older. I really didn't. I was in denial. I was pretty terrified. I didn't like the fact that everything was going south, that I would have less energy, that I would probably end up getting sick, that I hated the way I looked. I didn't want to go the Botox route, the surgery. I didn't fancy that. I didn't think it was possible for me to start doing, vigorous boot camp style exercise. I didn't want to starve myself to death, to be slim. Everything felt really worrying, was probably the best way to sum it up. And since I've stopped drinking, I have a whole different attitude, right? Now I'm so incredibly grateful that I get to get older, right? What an amazing gift. It's a gift to be getting older. I mean, I also think I look younger. I mean, you may laugh, maybe I don't. But I feel as though my skin's a bit clearer. I've got better eyesight. I mean, who knew that? Sober hair, masses more energy. If I don't look any younger, if I don't look any better to you, then the great news is I don't care. That's a massive change because I like myself more now, right? I've never met anyone who preferred themselves, as I say, when they were drinking. And truly, ditching the booze really is the best anti-aging hack ever. You genuinely cop a bit of the anti-aging magic. And that's scientifically proven too. Listen to the podcast, if you haven't already, with Dr. Anya Topiwala on alcohol and aging. She explains it in scientific terms, how stopping drinking genuinely helps you age better. And then the final insight 21, it is way more than just a health fad or a well-being trend. Years ago, I probably would have lumped going alcohol-free in with, doing a juice challenge or being vegan for a month or rocking up to one of those hardcore exercise regimes. But it isn't. It is literally the most important decision you will ever make. It is not just a health fad. It's not a well-being trend. It underpins everything. I wish there were other ways that I could stress this. I wish there was another way I could, I don't know, just kind of big this one up. And you've heard that expression, it's the gift that keeps on giving, which I still think is a really naff expression, but I can't find a better one. But it gets better every single year. That's why it's so powerful, isn't it? That celebrities go on about how amazing it is that they're on year 47, Anthony Hopkins, and year 31 or whatever it is, Elton John. It's still such a thing. It's such a thing. Don't underestimate the power of choosing to be free from the alcohol trap. Don't underestimate it. So to sum up, at 2000 days sober, I think I've finally become who I'm meant to be. Yes, there have been challenges, but it's also been miraculous. It really has. And as I say in my book, in Happy, Healthy, Sober, ditching the booze means you can finally see life in glorious technicolor. Now, there might be some bits you'd really rather not look at, but I'd rather have my eyes open, right? So, yeah, I hope that's made it kind of clear that I think it's the best thing you'll ever do. So you can find some of those insights on my blog post on the Sober Club. I'll put the links to the books and the supplements that I recommend in the show notes. Just a reminder of some of our events. Easiest way is just to go to the events page, thesoberclub.com. Do check out joining us if you haven't already. And next week, you'll get to hear our recording of the 250th episode. So my guests will be William Porter, Claire Pooley, and Laura Willoughby from Club Soda. So I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Alcohol Free Life podcast, brought to you by the Sober Club. Please rate and review. And if you want support, accountability, and inspiration, and you want to live your best life without the booze, check out thesoberclub.com.